Hey, just a heads up, this is the second in a series of videos I'm doing on Destiny 2 Shadowkeep, so if you want to watch the video I put up one day before release, I'd appreciate it. You don't need to see that one to see this one, but it does help give context to what I'm talking about. Also, this video will not go into spoilers for the campaign, I'm only going to discuss content that was in the advertisements before release. But with that out of the way, Shadowkeep has officially launched. After a few rough hours where Bungie was struggling to keep the servers running, me and my clanmates were all able to play the new expansion. To give a quick TLDR on how I feel about it, I think it's a really good expansion. I have a few minor issues, but those will either be resolved or highlighted based on the next week of content. So far, I am really enjoying it. Next week, I do plan on making a 1 week later video for Shadowkeep that will look more in depth on how they handle the next week and how it looks going forward, but for now, I want to get into the details of my first experience. And first things first is the story content. That's my main draw for Destiny, and I think that if the content from here on out is going to be as good as it was in the Shadowkeep campaign, I think this might be the best story Bungie's ever made for Destiny, even compared to something like Taken King. But I do have to say that it might be, because from what we've gotten so far, Shadowkeep's main campaign is going to be the introduction act for a longer story that they want to tell throughout the expansion's lifecycle. The best comparison for that would be MMOs, the easiest being World of Warcraft, where they would launch an expansion with a pretty big story, but it wouldn't end once the main story was done, and it would keep building on that throughout the patches that they'd release during the expansion's lifetime. With that being said, I do think that this introductory campaign is really good, and I think that it lives up to the hype that Bungie had built up for it. You go back to the moon, a destination in Destiny 1, and it's still abandoned by humanity. It's only occupied by fallen space pirates that are living in the ruins of our research station, and the Ancient Hive, who've recently constructed a fortress that the expansion is named after, the Shadowkeep, a massive castle that they are organizing in and might be trying to assault any Guardian who opposes them. One thing that really surprised me about that introductory campaign was how often it stayed in an oppressive atmosphere. Things were not to be taken lightly. It really tried to drive in the idea that the threat you're facing this time is of a bigger scale than anything you've ever faced before. I think that if the raid that releases in a few days continues that feeling and storyline much the same way Last Wish did for Forsaken, then Shadowkeep has a chance at being one of the best DLCs for Destiny that's ever come out, maybe even better than the Taken King. But of course, the story's not everything for a game like Destiny, it's also got a lot of combat focus, and in that, I think Bungie succeeded in their goals for changing the difficulty. Compared to Forsaken, Shadowkeep brought player power down, and as a result, bosses and major enemies are honestly feeling like they're major threats again. Of course, you'll still be able to mop the floor with any basic enemy, but when it comes to the heavy hitters that start showing up to fight you, you're really gonna have to stay on your toes, play smart, because they are bringing a good fight. I think the biggest indication of that was when I was fighting boss enemies in this story, because before I would just use a single blast of my super and most bosses would go down. Now, however, it's not a get-out-of-jail-free card anymore. They'll take some big damage, but the big bosses will not be down. You'll have to keep on fighting them, and they can really pack a punch. I do want to preface this, though, that it definitely needs some more experimentation. We're only in day 1 of the game, after all. But the damage that I was able to do, in comparison to what I was doing in Forsaken, I can see the difference. I do want to revisit this about a week later in the 1 week later video, when I'm going to be at least leveled up to soft cap, maybe higher, and I'll be able to tell if the damage is just because of the leveling process, or if the damage is actually going to stay consistent like that. I'll be sure to talk about that next week. But overall, when it comes to the combat changes, I do think right now it's just hard enough to be exciting without really being unfair to you for playing it. And that's really good. That's where I want the balance to be in a game like Destiny for PvE. Of course, there are going to be some people who are not happy about that. People who played the game because they wanted it to be a power fantasy more so than they wanted really visceral combat. But Bungie also catered to those players in this expansion as well. And that's where the finishing moves come in. You can activate those on near-death enemies, and what it will do is zoom in on you delivering a really stylish kill. I'm sure it varies from class to class. For my hunter, you're doing a little spin with your knives as you cut them down. And in the store, they're selling cosmetic finishers that will range from things like drop kicks to giant punches, etc., etc. Visually, these things look really impressive, And they can also be pretty beneficial if you add a mod to your armor that gives you finisher bonuses, such as spawning ammo for your gun, although it will come at the cost of a percentage of your super meter, so you're trading off your big, powerful super attack for ammo in the moment, be it heavy, special, primary, whichever mod you have slotted in. And speaking of mods, the last big change I want to talk about is Armor 2.0. Just to give a quick rundown for people who don't know about the changeover, the original armor sets had you get randomly rolled perks on armor drops that you get, but now you get randomly rolled stats, and you can slot in armor bonuses and armor perks with the mod system. Now, this change is the one that I am the most cautious about, although right now I do think it is an improvement. There are some parts that are just complete improvements. There's no compromise at all, but then there's some that make me unsure. The best part is that all of the previous perks are now mods, and said mods are actually reusable. Whereas before, when you used the mod, that was it. You had to get another mod if you wanted to use that mod again. Now, once you earn the mod, you can use it as many times as you want, and as many armor pieces that allow it. Now, instead of being capped by how many mods you actually have, you are capped by an energy system. Every armor only has a set amount of energy. You can upgrade the armor to have more energy, but your mods each cost a certain amount, so you have to play around with that in order to get your loadout the way it needs to be. I don't really see a downside to this new change. I think it just is better for the player overall. There isn't really anything that would bring this down. On the other hand, I am a little bit concerned about how stat distribution is going to be for the armor. I want to know if that's going to be a really big impact on the game. I want to see how it plays out before I pass any kind of judgment on it. I think worst case scenario, there might be some armors that have a higher amount of stat distribution than others, like where some might have 40 points distributed, others might have 60, and if it gets to the point where there's some armor sets that get power crept that have like 100, that would be a problem. But I think Bungie has the ability to handle that. I don't think they'll let it get to that point. So when it comes to comparing it to the old armor, do I think it is better? I think so right now. I want to wait for the meta to evolve to see if it is just completely better, no downsides, but I will figure that out as it goes on. We all will as the meta evolves. And that's about it for Shadowkeep Day 1. I think those are my biggest takeaways. I think the story has the potential to be some of the best Destiny's ever had. I think the combat has changed for the better, and I am cautious on the armor, but I do think that it's moving in a right direction. I plan on making at least one more video in this series for a 1 week later retrospective to see how the first week of Shadowkeep has been handled, how the community is kind of reacting to it, and I want to see how the raid will interact with the overall story. And if there's interest, I do want to make a video a month after launch, like a 1 month later retrospective that's focusing on Season of the Undying and how their season pass model is working. Because if there's interest for that kind of content, I do want to see how Bungie will step forward in regards to their plan for an evolving world. I do want to make some videos on how I think that will go. Yeah, if you want to see more content like that, then you can feel free to like and subscribe to the video, share it with your friends who might be interested in this kind of stuff, because every view helps, you know? And that's about all for today. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Make sure to have some fun.